And as always, and welcome to our last day of biology. For today, it's going to be a bit similar to 2 days ago, in that we'll have two teaching techniques that we'll talk about, and then we'll have just at the end one discussion so that we can sort of bring them together and think about how we might use them with each other.
Some of the testles, and it go Jones, and it also attaching in the Tamati Yens, the Tirangans and Drag Chitante, Hesan King in the Chitanta Doyes, the Tirangas by not something Chiago to Tabge, Tablam Mando and the Motochi Yens, the Jela Tamato landing also Trichi de anything like Kandadochi Redus, as well as taking like Tagi return against.
Because 2 days ago, we talked about using journaling and also talked about using visuals for teaching our classes. And then right at the end, you all talked about and shared some of your ideas for how you might include both journaling and using images and visuals in your own classes that you're teaching.
Something like Sinchi Jajor, Chachora, or they don't send the any Nasuki Persis Grota Pertanian sheet in that Tembigon, make it my in that Tembigon from Sinchiachora, take it Hamadelaya, and Chetsugu Susugan and the typical that tablet in Chanyam to kind of special tangi inside the Golangat Tires.
And today we'll add on 2 more. So we've already got journaling and the images and visuals. And today we will add in a class debate, but it is going to be a bit different from the debate that you normally do, especially since we're online like this. But we will add in a sort of debate and then also designing experiments.
Ani Cooper and the rest that in by now also Mando Shenda against Chiggins. That's Chica races Tambalaya, the Dulan Church or Zindan and a Dulan Church or what they young Dulan Chiagin water, Chesunamjing Stopasoya or what taking water this Mando race, Dulan Church, Nivatilaya, Nikalana, Nanatu Taksig Simjichi, Changuchigu, Panatic and Changuchigu race at the ends.
And all of this is going to be connected with the topics that we discussed yesterday. So we will still have a chance to talk more about diabetes, and also we'll talk more about the different variables that were included in the cats being scared video.
Tandanga sugi zindan on it chitab or chitab data, Nick Hesang also something to you. Lamsen Tandoyos, Tampoting to the Chinese Kugin as a Shivara, Titandoye, and Yatilaya, any also a taxation duty because that's Chance Gro, that's Jen Gregory, then Jutran and Juchisagoro and Jutrante, Gregory, Jitayo research or at the Pichas and Schmidt, Shenachi, Kauseta Kolaya, Telay and Juchimasona, Gregory Chindu Sachora, Tirangan Zendaya, Kesangi, some Jutan, and Doyo Pigana Chinese.
And the first thing that we'll need to do to kind of set up the debate that we'll have is just to come up with kind of the main topics that we want to include within the discussion.
That Donachi Caps, Tampo de la Carichua, Sananga, that reader Chibi Caps, Jushikari Carichi, only to do say, Jujistu, Chigoroa, Titanguris.
And to do that, I will say I started the list, but I'm actually now going to ask for your help to finish making the list of considerations.
Now, that de la Gila Egyptians, and it's a bana, they and it's a Sugita de la synthetic tag of the touching over the Watelaya, and it's a Suge, your question now, just Karikarichi.
And we started talking about this yesterday with the global problem of diabetes. And we posed the question and talked about it a little bit as to whether we consider diabetes to be a global pandemic.
The Kesang assumes that they got the testing the Shaja, rest to Chinese Sakuchigora, 진이 사쿠데 아니 제스지 근처에 나염지로 해서 계절지요레스.
And as I started my list of the different sort of factors or contributing factors for us to consider in this debate, I have 4 so far. I've come up with sort of biological and maybe genetic, the community that people live in, the location of that community, and also like money or the finances of any given person.
단다들라야 지가서그러다 진이 사쿠티 나차티 종아기 젠치야기 지다 코 네타 mambo지가 가는 게라기도라 남베시가타 유스 tampotikalana tanga tsugi jingis고라 링컴탄 되어요 준디나네 하퍼도 리지탄 되어요 주티 인스라 니녀텔라야 tanga tsugi 추디스고라 수수데사가 추디지고로 아티인스 스마텔라야 아니 수수게 네사게양 젠조고 요메티지 시바텔라야 아니 미 간사거티게 니오피기타 페샤세나타 펜줄기 니탄치고로 어디인스.
And so now I would like to ask you all to help me add to this list. Let me know what am I missing, because I do think there's more factors. And you can do this either if you want to type it in the chat, that's good. Or if you want to unmute and say something, then I'll add it that way.
단다 투치트샤도 왔다 투데간텔레 가츠고 카누자인스 카누자레 체츠고 파나로 지스로 파나 카스 체츠 카이샤 닌두스 소나디도 네 파조데 춘동치사데 지샤나디두스 다 셴다 단데들라 게라기 체만도 시스 지도가 다 셴다 데라야 진유사쿠라 기나사디 제버치니기 젠치니다 셴다 가라가리요레사.
Okay, great. So yeah, I see.
See the Jolam is diet. The one under diet is also diet or like behavior.
Okay.
Behavior. Next one is symptom is like stress.
Okay.
Attitude.
I'll just add all of these.
And
Okay.
then another stress, and then like inertia means sweet food.
Okay. Yeah, and so diet, sweet food. Well, and then specifically calling out Coca-Cola.
Oh.
Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, and I see Samchel again. Yeah. Food.
Very
yeah.
nice one.
Oh, okay, and age. Yeah.
Semte, or actually, semte means worry, and over here someone says that means stress or pressure. Consider stress.
Okay. I like.
Semte means worry.
Okay.
And I think also dreams.
Did you say dreams?
Yes, dreams. You know, like dreams.
So would this be like related to sleep?
It's in the chat.
Okay.
Dreams.
Yeah, I think that's good too. Yeah. So diet, we'll say yeah, like diet and drinks here, and that includes the Coca-Cola. Okay, I think this is great. I think now we will have, because we'll go into oh yeah, good point here about this possible viral component. Thank you for bringing that to our memory. Okay, I think this is a good list. It might not be 100% complete, but I think this is a good list to get us started to go into the next step for setting up our debate.
다들 가수게 지금 두고 시작때 차성화 지다리면도 심바나 가수가 다때 나다 지고지 마치지고도 같이 제때가 가수라 두 강라강사 야고지라도스.
And the way that we will do this, it's going to be a kind of a progression from thinking on your own, thinking individually, and then we will sort of get into bigger groups, and then we'll talk about it as a full group.
다들 가수 지야데가린 시스템 발라 지 페이지가 뭐서 걸었다 지 총총이 전부 자가 무티가라 지인스 담보들라야 아니 수수미 그 레링문에 삼로다 저와 뜻제 되게 제라야 네 로카나네 집주들지야제 되게 제라야네 진짜 총용이도 수들지야스.
And so to start with, we'll just, at least to get a general idea, and I know that we talked about this yesterday too, but if you can raise your hand, so we're going to say, raise your hand if you are saying, yes, you do think that diabetes is a global pandemic.
That address genes, what Ticarians Tandanga Sushinu Sakusa, Jiki Kunchenayam Chiridu, Sagate, Race and your panel of Pacharches, Lobaya Charches, and Loba Chasaspa.
I'll give him a moment. I'm going to write the count there. I see. Sometimes it's going up and down, maybe changing a little bit.
I has question, Kelsey.
Okay.
Mi Mongola Captain Gan Samladina and Zamling Kyon like Cap de Roshira, and Kunkiv Naim like the Kunzo Senzendo, the country Roshina.
What do you mean by pandemic? What is the limit?
Okay. This, so I can say something, but also I will say that's a good question to even debate the definition of pandemic in your discussion. And then I can say.
The topic I was to stimulate and the total the Carsa Rukana Rukadin Singani, Dulanchi Caps, what to the Chicaps, and Nikurangi, Kunchenayam side digger, what just Kunchenayam side digger, Senji Shatangana, Dulanana degrees.
But I'll just say a very general definition that can be debated, but the pandemic is something that is affecting a large portion of the world or the whole world.
The Chitangi Bana disagrees that the Kunchegi name said the any Kuge Chitangi Senichi Shaba in Banarwa, any Zamlangi Sachun Pechualaya, Shuchin to Patayana, Zaman Chun Yonsu Shuchin to Yagi in Nasatina Yorwa, Atindala Kuyoris, Timiset and the Dela Person Kuget and the Gila Senichi Shaswan, Senisha Ju Senitarayanko.
Okay, and the reason I wanted to just see approximately how many of us said yes is because we're going to see if there's any shift in this number after we go through the discussion and debate.
Halam juice to Sra, Tanda de Gele to Strugun Syndicarin Sena, and also Tadata Rolanchi Groa, the Kunchinayam said, Tigi, a good singing town, Kuge, a Tiocola, Julanchi to the Chinu with Jelaya, and it Adangasu meet you, my ship made you dig a Netandela and John Rugu to Rugumandu said, Taichetians.
Okay, we will get into our breakout rooms to discuss this in just a moment, and that's why in the chat I put the list there for you. That way, as you talk in your breakout rooms, if you need a reminder of the factors you want to talk about, they are there for you in the list in the chat.
Tanda this Jilang Atsu called the Gosha against Tanda Natsu because of that Tandangatsu to Chenchi Yorota, Chinisaku Chenchi Tuchigora, Tute, Tandagi, Chinton Satella Trisha, yes, it is Tamaket Churanga Tagunatella degrees.
And just before we go into breakout rooms, I'll also say there is this good question here asking if the flu and the cold are considered a pandemic.
That Tandela, Chinton the Troya, which to share struck, Aridulana, Natsuki Chamana, Chamba Chamni, or they any cooking chicken, Naminchero is Shadus.
And for that, with the flu, there definitely have been some cases in the past where it was considered to really be truly a flu pandemic that was affecting either most or all of the world.
다 디가서 플루세나 nga chuge chugor chamrim sigdo chambaga ta remnela kugodwa ya tisamba ati tan debig lojina ta ba mana chi jechila ya jesisgora ta jechila ya shushin treyagi ni tantne chon res tisamba ti kapsa kunchene res.
And I think other than that, for the moment, I actually want to leave this as an open question to give everyone even more things that you might want to consider and think about as you talk in your breakout rooms.
Tati shenda chezu tanda rukal goshejes tambalaya ani tukola jolanda ani karsogre tati tudechiagi jushile shagi ins.
And just one more thing before I open the rooms. So you're going to be debating this, discussing this question in your rooms. And just know that this is to share ideas. So you don't need to necessarily all agree within your group, but this is just meant to sort of pull out some new ideas.
Tanda de nga so rukala goshejagra goshejas tambala chetsu jolanda ta tudechigra da tati karsogre tati chiati kapsa zoode kares tambalaya chiga neton chigala sama kilengwa de mariswa ti zoode nga so chi Kimalaya gendo mampuyer da zoode ne samtsiti chi pugone swashi ora otiins.
And you'll also have a focus really on the reasons for what you're saying, so the rationale for what you're saying. So we don't want to just have a yes or no answer. Here it's actually the reasons are even more important.
Tanda di kapsa suchi kareta gorsena chi kunchinaya roese marese zam maimbarwa ke chishute tegi resena junsen karchini berwa maresena junsen karchini zoode tege jabla kususu gita junsen de la ya samutawches.
And we will have about 5 minutes to talk about this, and then as we often do, we'll come back as the whole group and discuss there.
Tanda nga so tudechiagi karmanga yeswa tigi chanujela ni chuma nyamte thanching jomchia yes.
I think at least mostly we're back, yeah. So what I would like to do is, I'm going to ask for 3 volunteers to share. And before we do that, I just wanted to share 2 variations of this activity that you might do if you were doing this in your own classrooms.
토마텔에 디드시자기 인스로와 단다기 nga수게 지 제고 지드럽상 셰고데 드스탄발라야 케티 지마체수근 전단나니 제고데 드바이나 제고데라 고 들르게 남바도 마소나 만도니 요레스티 콘데시자기 인스 니티 제라 아니 단다 니 당라미 순슬라야 투 수수게 딘세나나 트리들카리 총송테 아니 지 사말레 데시자야 코게나이스.
So one of those variations is you could, if you wanted to, gradually increase the number of people involved in the discussion. So right now, especially for the sake of time, we're doing 1 person, small groups, then whole class. But if you wanted to, you could do maybe individual and then do a pair with 2 people and then a small group and then the whole class. And then of course you can change it within that too.
Tati ko chitang chikare sene rolang che ter wata ko tanda nga suga kari chile tampu mi su ga samnu chitang ani tige jela ya dinsena ne rukhana ne rolang che tige jela ya nyamtun zom chi tanda ne rolang nga re tira china dikores ne temenda yang che suga ngone tane tampu tela ya mi chi su samnu tanga shi tige jela ya mi ni nyamta cha tige de tang khron ni paru ga sam chite jile chi Tegi jelaya densin chonchon rukwa chunchun chuzu tegi nangla dhulan chigi tamatela yan zindra kanza ni nyamten dus dhulan chigi chinan dikores. Yan tegi parola ya ko densin go gotan te yan chu gotan chigi namba mandawa gana gwenang dikores.
You can also, and sometimes this one is fun, and you're probably familiar with it too, but it could be taking the class into 2 sides. And then instead of, so I ask you, do you think yes or no? but you would tell each half of the class, okay, you need to sort of support and have evidence for the answer yes, and the other class or the other half of the class, they have to say no, and they have to have evidence for that. And this is just, it's a really effective way to have everyone think about both sides of it, because sometimes, you know, we'll tend to be stuck in our own view. So this is a good way to kind of open that up.
Yonrochis, Litina do Lingan Tenugela, and Paro Kuranigo Parola, Rolanchi Chipaimbaina, and Dinson Susugana, Cho and Chagala Samleta that I am put to the Congress.
And we're ready now, I think, to hear from 3 volunteers. And I'll just have a reminder to make sure, please also share your reasoning. What was your rationale for what you talked about with your group?
Tandami Sumlaya, the Aneko Kijasheg Kukatana, yes, and it Jesham Stambala Ketchishute, Netinda Dumbig Jinsenti, and a castle on the Sonronas.
Okay, maybe group number 9.
Great.
Yeah, we actually decided or agree that diabetes is another kind of pandemic, because if we just look back in history, most of the pandemic actually happened through some kind of virus or microorganism, bacteria, or so. I think diabetes, it has so many factors that we cannot pinpoint one single factor.
Mm.
And also, in addition to that, it is not infectious.
Mm.
The only criteria that we can consider it as a pandemic is that it is prevalent to all over the world. If that is the case, then we have to accept all other diseases such as cancer and all other diseases has, we have to accept as a pandemic or something like that. Cancer, blood pressure, and a stomach pain and everything, because it is prevalent to every other parts of the world.
Mm.
Yeah, that is the main reason.
Dense Goa Gandhi that the any convention member like in the GS, Jensen Karchalambana, Lugila Teva in Baina, and the convention name Manchi Shigarwata, Tamagi exchange, I think Atsugi, Tangasuga, Disagorata, Tassin, Simbugla, Tassin Simburic, in the Ruchireshas, in Stambala, Tandagatela, and the Chinina Sam Banaco, Ching, changing those Gayo Maris, Chen Mampuchila Tangi or Restra, Techiche, and the co Chabatan Zaman Council Champions, Tadanga to Kit in Zaman Council Chapi. Chabati, Shisha, the town, and the Kunchan Island in the Chigo Pana, not such and that's how my Kunchan with the Chigudus, and the Picha Shabina, Chiga, Trashetua, Coconuts, Dinner, last open Zaman Council Chapshadus, this number the Kanza Nasa did not get out with Natsa Tamaya, Kunchan and Shabudus, in Central Lines.
Great, and that's also a great reminder of how often these debates or these discussions will come back to what is the definition of a pandemic, which is why I kept it broad before, because this is raising the particular issue of whether the infectious nature is included in the definition or not.
Tanda Gishila Son in a sheep Jesha, Tanda Kolaya, Shinigana de Jingatsugi and Guyag and Gwinet in the Rue Maresetia, Guinea Ligio Marista, Tanda Gilagson. Get you shooting as you get to know cups of Kalchagores and Tampo Tani Shatante Ketchamuchaga restaurant, getting at Sugi Tani Shatante and changing at Tampon Guine, say I get Tani Tishama such an allegores, and the Instambala Tampo Gilage, Shinignas, Tanda Kunchin names, say I get Tani Shastambalaya, Niku Chapchisa Dojila, Shachi de, and in Guine say Tina Jumes.
And the second volunteer?
Okay, so our group also most of our groups also agrees to say that diabetics is not a pandemic because in this pandemic, we need to understand pandemic and epidemic. So epidemic is a pandemic is a like epidemic that spread all over the world, and epidemic means infectious disease that happens in a particular time. So it needs to be happen in a particular time. So when we see the history of the pandemic, they all happens in a particular time, not all time. Yeah.
그저 소야데 단단가 주 근처 나염사데 삼루당 바이바이나로와 그저 가릴라야 시샤바 인세나 근처 나염당 니 나염스고라다 어딜라 시샤케지시고요 스탠다드 간에 하버트 근처 나염사데랑 아주 루지나시 무치무치 따바이바나 근처 나염사데 뒤뚱이 진치라 종샤스 뒤쪽 더퍼 종대야 되는 거를 도스 틴스탄발라야 그저그 딘생원에 양데 근처 나염치라 용인진치 메스.
Great. And this is also, again, highlighting another distinct part of that definition of what is the role of, does it need to be limited? And if so, how would we want to define that? What limits would we want to set on the time for something to be a pandemic?
다다 대한 속에 아직 그 천이쇼피 값을 천이가나들이 청구에 지금 네트 젠다 지랑 아주 전수당 것도 스카치라바나 뒤쪽에 체크줘야 지거와 And
one more.
Yeah, Mishendaji.
All so again, Dala, any Hanzo group Nawadira.
That's all.
And Danganzo Tara Re, Tatanda, the pandemic lady Karasanata, like it's singing Jatan Kola and Karasanata, Karajinako, Zamling Yona, the Shukin Tematic, pandemic each other. In this Zambalata Tanda with the any Chini Nazata Ojina, Ko Shugan Chemboji Tebumundos, Penani, Pena Penjogi Kangi in a Chapstegi Kangi in a Tangmaji, pandemic D Gune, and Pet Chiso Koranola, and Tapsi Chemboji Tebuto. Chuk Chembo Tematabi Gone Pejeta, pandemic the Peje, Sagosarama, Shugan Tebatangi Genata, Pena diabetics Porang Dizogeta, Gersozola, Shukan Tebuera, Luzajan as of a station. In a caption down and they
That's all. They group number 5. They also think it's not a pandemic because what they see is if does this have a global effect in a large scale, like economically or like that in many terms. So diabetes is affecting individually in a small community, but not like worldwide in economic or other terms. So they think it's not a pandemic.
Okay, and I see there's a few things in the chat. Okay, and so talking about, we need a group to oppose these, and it looks like group 2 is saying that that it is a pandemic. And since one of the causes is worldwide, I think, if I'm understanding that.
And then the Sheda Chigaro, the Katechinigo card, Nibati Kalana, Kosukunchana, and Chilang with the Chigayas, Kachila Baina, Taku, Chinchinigate, Tikara, or Karate, and in Zamlan such a Casacola, New York, Este, Tapki, and Kosu, the Kunchanaching with the Chigayas.
And okay, yeah, a few more points there. Right, sometimes, so I'll say one from the chat and one from a group that I visited that I think is important too. So also consideration of organizations that might kind of get to say whether it fits the definition. And a second consideration is there is debate even within the scientific community about the role of number of deaths in defining a pandemic. And this is related to the question about whether a cold is a pandemic. Some people might be on the side of saying no, because it's a relatively low death rate. But if you say that's not included in the definition, maybe you'll say yes.
That's Chikarana, Tanget Densen Chikarane to the Chikasa, Neko Jinsaya, which down so Chidanda de la 전통나 지샤치가라나 고 다 이제 근처에 나면 레 말에서 터치 이거 소파치 그래서 그거다 티 산천 거치 맞지 대양라래기 그래서 소파티가 녀때 이 가르에서나 지금 생육기 생육박에 초대가 나와야 지금 다 지금 뒤기 세티 거치라 샤마샤세요 거디 콜라야 고 아트와 시청부 요래 돌랑 시청부 난거 요레스 야 비샤샤바이나 지디 가리라 시샤그레스 담발라야 나츠티라 테네데 땡아 추게 지금 디톤도야게 세치고로 치친도야 치고로 어디게 세티 양고 전부를 해 말래 되게 내한테 시작그레스 야 비샤샤나 참반도 고 참반도 담바이면은 가시게 양고 지금 제가 나면은 샤니에 여러 가시게 샤게 말레스.
Okay, and now just to sort of finish this up before we're going to switch to talking about practicing making hypotheses, is let's do another hand raise. So we had about 10 last time for saying yes, and so if you're thinking yes, diabetes is a pandemic, then raise your hand.
다 당긴 바나로와 때 신이나사티 근처 내염로에 세스나 레세니 미주 잠스도스 나 단다 양체 저때 양체 당긴스 아니 신이나사티 근처 내염 레 섬요나 라바자로나스
Two, maybe? I see. Chignisu, we've got 3. So maybe a little bit less.
Oh,
we got more now. Okay. So similar, but maybe a bit less. So because more are coming. And this, I think just one more thing to say about this is really a true question that is debated. And so that's often a good thing that we can include in our classes when there really are these points that people disagree on because they're viewing it from different perspectives. That those can be really good questions to incorporate into our classes.
단다게 지금 둘러나 지거로 와디 단다가 속에 미티 바나고 가시치기다 진영도 같은 도도 제르데 진영도 샤로 바나 단다가 속에 지금 둘러나 지거로 와 둘러나야 다 지금 다레 마레세 둘러나 데다 아니 지금 마튼비기 디어로다 갈수 그랬다고 준체만 붙이던 거여로 와 어디 땅 좋아만 붙이는 거로 와다 데이터데 네케데 야 지마스 전자 트피카서 양 지금 전자에 나한테
All right, now it's time. And so don't forget this, we'll come back to it, but we're going to switch and spend just a little bit of time talking more about experimental design and hypotheses. Okay, and this time, I'm again going to ask for your help in recalling some of our lesson from yesterday. And what I would like for us to do here is list, and yeah, I actually didn't start this at all before, but list some of the variables that we talked about related to the cat video.
담보텔에 제수게 디 계산 전자 단려요 비간에 시텐지나로 제스 시텐 카리콜라나로 제스나 심미가 거기 년진스도가야 되게나네 대단려요 지게다 젠스고라 주장당 양은 지취 가시 지도스 민도로 제스
food meal.
Okay.
라체
Let's see. We'll just write these now. Okay. And you can type these in the chat or say them out loud.
Yeah, cucumber.
Let's see. Oh, I see. Okay, so we can maybe we even want to do that then of saying maybe even like a type of food.
And I think timing.
Okay, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by timing?
Time when we experiment, it's morning or
Mm.
afternoon or night,
Mhm.
or like amount of time.
Ooh, okay,
You know,
so and these are two different ones. Yeah, so we'll say time
Yeah.
of day
And
and
so how amount, yes, is 15 minutes or like 10 minutes, something like this.
how long it's there. Okay. Yeah, that's really good. And I'm seeing some of them here too. Yeah, Wangden, can you, oh, I'm not sure what you mean. Like, do you mean like the type of cat, maybe?
Position of cat.
What was that?
Position means the cat is the cucumber is the place on the backside of the cat, like that.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, the mood of the cat. That could be difficult, but that is a good one. Okay.
And location?
Oh, I see that. Yeah. Here, I'm still up here. So I see color. Maybe I'll say, how about color of cat and color of object?
Shape and size of the object.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna do those as two. So size of the object, shape of object. Okay. Okay, yes. So type of response, that we're going to talk more about that one. Oh, I see. Oh, the location. Oh, that's a good point. There could be two things: location where it's happening and the location of, yeah, so I'll say that. I think we're almost good here. Where's the location one? Oh, or did I not write it? Yeah, okay, location of object and location of experiment. Okay, I think this is good. We've got a lot, and I think there could be even more. Oh, where are they going? Oh, there. So what I'm going to do now is just arrange these. And yesterday we talked about having an independent variable, and we talked about having controlled variables.
단다 대토 만부치라도 같이 소마배하고도 스와 단다 계산한 순전의 TV 값을 아니 그 쟁나네 이러다 주치기 나네 가르세요레스나 뒤지기 드메기 인디펜던스가 드메기 주치지다 아니 가지고 당정기 주치지 스테시자요레스.
And when we have those, we would think about it that we're going to have one independent variable, but we can have many of the variables that are going to be controlled, meaning they'll stay constant.
되게 나니로와 가수게 드메기 주치때 강직지로와 지요 받지 아니 가수게 당정 지야요 주기 주치때 아니 가수고 망보여는 거레스티 단다게 당정기 주치세나 가수고르세나 지 유라메피간에 샤가이기다 지 네탄치고로와 어때다 고고요레스.
And in this case, we have also the dependent variable, and this is how the cats will respond.
단 네탄데 값인 바나 가서 뒤지긴 주치요 요레스다 뒤지긴 주치되게 가스고르세나 네 값인 바나 뒤지긴 주치되게 아니 시미티게 야랭가나로 치트고도세 뒤창고 요레스.
And that one, the dependent variable, for the moment, we're not really going to worry about that one. For right now, let's just focus on the one independent and the many controlled.
단다게 뒤지긴 주시고로 아티 콜라에 단당 가수기 니살로 마타나 디코리스 단당 가수 케치시티 카레 삼로 당알라나 디커사 뒤메긴 주치텔라야 가수 살로 마타나 디코리스타 알 뒤지기 independent independent 뒤메긴 주치치오라다 뒤라 마고게 따라와진 그 주치 뒤메긴 주치테다 아니 뒤메긴 주치 칸치오라 뒤메긴 주치 칸치테다 아니 karsa tangzang gen jurchi mambo chigorwa o teta kola samtang yes.
And what we'll do now is we're going to prepare to go back into our breakout rooms and talk a little bit about how we would design an experiment.
Tadanda ngaso dinsana gosaja de terwa ani 지금 ngasoge takje te kanado chi chango chi insa te kola tu de yes.
And the thing that you need to do right now, before we go into breakout rooms, is to take a look at this and pick just one. And so you'll just keep it in your mind, or you can write it down if you want, but pick one of them. And that is going to be your idea to share with your team about which one will be your one independent variable.
Tanda de la yamambuch to a dig nani kanchi damrochis, damjute and China degree, Samuna Yana degree, statue damjute, Jelaya, Susu Dinsan and Rui Capsa, Nisusu Tanda de nani kanchi damjute, Pala son to the Chibuyore, to the Chijinon and then on a stick damjute, Nicharanga damjugan to make in Juchiguyora, to make it Juchiguyopa, at Taranja Jiguyores.
So probably once you get to your team, you will have chosen different ones. It's unlikely that everyone in your team will choose the same one. So you might have to do a little bit of convincing to then within your team, pick only one.
Dinsan atli ruins tambalaya anangaso to make it Juchigoro, Susuga Dambatan, and Dambate Samachi, something that Ingamariswa is tambalaya. Ani chechu chamage tudurchi phalaya chi karsubrata kiche de ni chamage chikagala minten khapachi gures chechu dinchana na no me chamage dumege juchi kanchidam gures.
And then we are going to practice taking that, whatever you choose as the independent variable, we're going to practice making a hypothesis based on that.
Tanda chechu dinsanganani damchajuge dumegin juchi orwati shisha de ani kachiguresana ani choshachi chiguyores.
And to do this, I'm typing this into the chat now so that you have it, but we are going to come up with something called an if-then statement.
Tanda di kanaro chichuyo mete gelagi di chintong kursa de krugi insta di kapsu chechugo samna tanga de karesana tanda nga chu chosha system bala yongtong ti kalana ani tigna la ya ani inchi if and then like the keti dinaina ani tini dinaro chichongres keti tang tini se tencha ani youtube picture chigo yores.
I typed it in the chat now. And the way it's set up is you'll say, so if we change, and then this is going to be changing your one independent variable, then, and you'll have a hypothesis about how the cat will respond, and that's the dependent variable.
Ani ta tuchigi karsa tumegin jirchitiwa ta tumegin jirchiti jiratang vaina teni sigota dendwa ani tignala karchiguresana ta chorangi chosha chigoro chosha te chuguyores ta koshimigi yalente tandi dinarochi chagres agi dina chuguyores.
So I'm going to leave this screen up for about 10 more seconds so that you have time to make sure that you picked one, and then I'll open the breakout rooms.
Tanda kachakachi shagi yins wandigas yaputaro chis thodela ne tike jelaya nga so ne dinsen atle tuge yins rukho bashi jagi yins.
All right, I think we are back. And so the way this will work now, again, I basically always ask for 3 volunteers. I think that's my favorite. And we're going to hear from the 3 volunteers. And then as a whole group, just briefly talk about how we might be able to actually test the hypotheses that you came up with.
Tanda 양체데 미슴 당랑성게 데시자로 지스타데 수수가 딘슨으로 카게 디로다 가스거다 튜미지응우 간에 데시자고레스테 디간라야 수수가 소샤데 트리간라야 네테 딱시 간다스 드부임베세야게 디콜란 데시나로나스
and we can have our first volunteer.
Yeah, that tambude peronas.
Okay, I will present from our group thought. So in our group, some choice the size, if we change the size of the object, like cucumber, then it and then, but majority of us decided if we change the shape of the cucumber, then the cat will not like jump, as they see the shape before. For example, if we change the shape of the cucumber, like if we set up like cucumber like a ball, then the cat will jump right away, after the cat see the shape.
Zota jujagins, Rata Tanda Kiratika Zota, Yebla Juratanga deta, Richiz of Hashimana, and Ekusu Soshatika Resena, Nishimiti Shenang Antachi de Tantina Chonja Jagamaris, yes.
And so just to make sure I understood, you're saying the one thing that you're changing is the shape of the object. So like color will be the same, location, only changing the shape.
Yes.
I have Kunan Jurata instance.
Second volunteer.
Are you going to ask them to how they are going to do the experiment, or are you going to ask this question in the?
We will. Yeah. So I'd like to hear from the 3 people, and then we're going to talk more about the experiment.
Okay. Yeah. That also takshi simji karas chigi yin saya tirwa ni jela tampo misumgi susugi dinsanane dolankari chanso tin desijab tigi jela ni takshi simji karas do chigi base tigang lai kishya yins. Yeah, that means you the pesho.
Our independent variable is the location of the cucumber. So we want to put this in front of the cat in his or her awareness. And the hypothesis is that it won't hope.
Kusugi tekarin sena tande kirati jaksa la yanjwa tangins kusugi kirati kawashagi insena ani shimigi denola shagins shimila denola shastambala ani keti roa kogi kiragi nisaten jwa tangde ten kirati shimigi denola shabana shimiti shena gane chonja jagmares kusugi chashate ins.
Great, and our third one.
Yeah, somebody precious.
Tamazo group je geba yeseo.
That's all.
Tamazo na shambani gana da order yachison. Tamazo yang eto chigara sana te. Tamazo tanda size yora. Oten jawa te shamba sama chipa shane. Ta telin jawa tang shanas. Ote seremba shi gana korang tale ta yana tegdo. Ta telin yana chunju shu ya. Yana chunju shu shana ko yana teg mari chunju shu ni shana ta ba chikban ni thong shi ma ta na me. Yana yana chunju shu shana yana ko chiktre ya musi ngamcha yega. Otindi me yo mare se ta suti.
Chunju thong me jo de su chan sembe.
Ta de chunju shin na gore.
They're talking about like kind of they want sides of the cucumber. What they're saying is like they want to measure the limit of the size of the object. For instance, if you have like cucumber that's too big, the cat will see that as a wall or something like that. Too small and it doesn't affect. So what they're going to do is like the limit of the size of the cucumber that, yeah, that just scare the cat. Yeah, yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, with this.
Be able to. So in the chat now, I'm going to write three different variables that we have discussed so far. So they're in the chat. We're going to talk about shape of the object, location, and the size.
tanda ngaso ge correct the theoresena ngibode게 그런 거 예쁘지 거기 내사지 아니 거기 지정 처로와 지정 ngaso게 다 두메기 입실라 담기 인세티 두터 담이어레스.
And just to explain why I wanted to do it this way, from a teaching perspective, I wanted to narrow it down a little bit. In our first list, we had 11 variables. For us to discuss all of those right now, right, that will be very complicated and take a lot of time. So from a teaching perspective, what I wanted to do is narrow it down just to these three. So we can still talk about the idea of experimental design, but now we'll focus only on shape, location, and size, rather than trying to talk about everything at the same time.
당가서 드들 주안안에 그 이제 최근에 담이야 요치긴 접시 당가 전년에 지금 정성아 다 대달라야 삼루당바이나 지 기겐지기 삼루당 등게 간에 그다 삼루당바이 바나 단당가서 다그 같이 용화이 바나 치약답되어요. 그래서 단당가서 가리 삼루당게스는 접시 단단 지샤주 대탁심라야 아니 삼루당게 연습 집등이 바나 현다 망부치라 삼루당나 리코레스 그 삼친 치야라 답되어요. 지든 대타 심차때 가서 담대티 아니 가서 가서 그랬다. 지금 다시 심지기 창고 간다로 지지기 위해서 뛰어가는 시작이었어.
And so for this will just be a question for the whole group. We're not going to go into small groups for this. But if we now we want to actually design this experiment. And for this, we'll choose that we can change the shape of the object, but the other two, location and size, those will stay the same.
Tanda didala tabayna ro tanda ngasukita dinsen goshajagi mes soma nyam dustrude chigi yens ro ta tanda digna ngasula sub dogorwa digna ne ani ayeptila yanjra ta ani kugil nisate ta kugil chechonte ranjashagi yens.
And so what other considerations do we need to have for this experiment? We have our independent variable and we have our controlled variables. What else do we need to think about to set this up?
단단가서 다시 신비대 지야라야 가서 뒤매긴 줄시 요래 드니 지 당증의 줄시 젠다에 요레스 팀세 단단가 따띠 강라 가서 다시 드립 값에 젠다 가서 삼루 당고 했더니 가리가리 요레스.
Okay, so I'm looking in the chat here. If it, oh yeah, go ahead, and then I'll talk about the chat.
Okay, it's experimental group, right?
Yes. So maybe when you're saying experimental group, are you thinking of like how many cats to include,
yes,
or what cats to include?
Yes, how many cat and what kind of cat, and how to find like those cats same age or same size or same like group.
Yeah,
dependent variable, cat's reaction.
Okay, so in measuring the cat's reaction, okay, great. So we're getting a lot of good ideas. So I'm just gonna pause kind of and make sure to point out each one of these that are really key aspects. So I think the first one let's talk about is we'll just say number of cats to include. So this is definitely one. You want to know your sample size in the experiment. And in this case, we would want to make sure the cats were all as similar as possible. Because we're not testing different cats. Right now, we're trying to only test the shape of the object. So this is one of the things to consider. Sample size, how many cats, and we want them to be as similar as possible.
당보들에 가지고 지금 도시 신지 지역 값은 지금 다 찹세트스 거로 어떻게 나니 가리 삼는 발에 심이가 소지를 지금 인사해 주고 와다 미스타발라야 심이게 망로가 소지를 지금 배 아니 심이되다 지금 할람 더우요나 야오요레스.
Another thing that was mentioned is and it even so saying what if it's dark, and Choyoung also mentioned a couple of other variables, and that's a good reminder. So like light or dark, all of those things, we want to keep them the same in this experiment, because for one experiment you can only change one thing and test one thing. We already decided it's the shape, so now everything else needs to be constant.
때문에 현대형 가수가 이제 취된다 현대 망부진의 시작성 지금 반대로 나코나는 간다는 망부시 성수와 다들 값이 반응 가수가 그래서나 뒤매긴 주치 칸치체로 뒤매 주치 칸치가 담는 거 질라야 티 칸치지로 왔다 현대 참아 란자샤고 인저 매주가는 샤고 요레스 현대가 현당 진주치 현대 가리 인반의 참만 저 매비가는 샤고 요레스.
Yeah, and I think for time, I'll just note one more. So we've got 3 considerations here. And the third one is going to be what was mentioned about the dependent variable, and that is related to how is the cat responding.
단단되는 선배들 가르쳐고래서는 가지고 뒤치긴 주치디 가르레서티 따고 요레스타티 뒤치긴 주치디 가지고 담하게 준비 들어와 준비 때 가르다 가지고 가르다고 하려나 delaya 심미티게 야랭 간다고 어떻게도 오사에 됐다고 요레스.
And for that, we need to determine before starting our experiment, how do we want to measure that? There are a lot of different measures for taking note of the cat's response. And so I'll ask you now for a few suggestions. You can unmute or type these in the chat, but how could we actually measure the cat's response? 뒤치기 이제 취대라야 체자고요레스 체자티 가자고르스는 심미티게 야랭 간다로 치트도 사이티 체자고요레스 이나 아니 티 가리 간다 체자gembe 가리 체자gembe 사이티 니체수게 텔라 셰나 그도 야만텔라야 트사텔라 지나티도 사. Ooh, yes, that's a great height of the jump. That's a great quantitative measure.
And then measure the how to say, is it a fear level? You know, use some machine and then measure how afraid it is. You know, like measure the fear.
Oh, how would you measure the fear?
I think you can use some EEG like machine on the cat.
Yeah, you could measure maybe something, it's a brain activity. You could measure heart rate. Yeah, there's so many here. So maybe Dawa, you can say say the translation.
지다다데 가서 그 전자자 담발에 도착한데 전자자도 세대다요. 현대 단다 아니 중요성하는 신데 가서게 레파가라야 레츠가 로른 제치티가데 레파게 지가 첼리가나도 지레도 대단한 거래템 생각 속에 지가 닝기 빙세 당한테로 라바가 딱 가데던 체자지거로 대떨라 제란 거레스. All right, so there's really a lot here. These are great. I'm just going to highlight a few. So also noise. I really like the noise. You could use, you can measure the sound wave. So noise, that's also a great one. And also for how many times, that's a great one. You can easily observe that. So the other ones I'll highlight is how many times, and also how fast is it actually running and moving away. How many times means?
Oh, so how does it jump only one time or jump twice or 3 times?
현대식 통화 가서 제 전자작을 때 제자열레스.
And I think just one more to highlight then is that I think is really interesting is about the time that it takes to actually notice the object being there. And then the reaction. Yeah, Wangdan, that's a good addition.
현대식 가서 추측은 안에 계시면 스탄발라야 거기 기라티 샤요바데 통합에 추측가서 준 것은 사이트 당 안에 통노젤라 ял렌텔라야 추측가서 것은 사이트가 추측돼. 그냥 야고도스.
All right, so we are just going to finish up now. We're going to go into just one more short breakout room, and it will be similar to last time in that now will be your chance to talk with your group about, and this is in the chat, your own idea for a lesson plan that could include debate and discussion and something with experimental design.
단단가서 아니 루컬라 고셔제다 지수 가리지고레 세나로 다다 디랑가솔 주주지로다 저 당보대 롤란체기 디로와 녀텔라야 가속에 덕시 심지지에게 덕시 심지기 디 참고지에지고로와 어떤 샤페쇼 당대단 체랑게 아니 전자기 소트기 지 참고대 간다로 지기 메세트 콜라 아니 롤란체지스.
So the idea with this is, again, you can have a chance to share all of your wonderful ideas with each other in your small groups. We'll hear just from a few of you once we come back, and then we will be done. We will have concluded our biology section.
따단다 지수 딘생나네 두콜라 두두치로 제스티젤라네 가서 양치 냠든 전데 다야 냠대야 고 계시셔 고 그정도였 디젤라 가서 I think we're back, and I think that we even have time to still hear from my favorite number three volunteers. If you want to share what your group talked about for your lesson plan idea. This is automatically muted, so I need to just be conscious about then the Susu on a carriage to the Chigo, but the enemy soon get along on the Motuchiro chase. That was Susu Homes and Changochis Tambalaya, Tiran to Tiran, the Shijaju to kind of special thing in Betty Colarwa.
In our case, Dr. Kelsey, in our case, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, in our case, it was more of self-inquiry, like you give a situation, since we want to introduce about diabetes, so like we can ask student, did your parents had diabetes? And then, if we have such questions like how did it come, when did it come, so we can just go back to our parents and get idea from them, and then after that we go about how it happened, what is the reason of it, what is the reason for that, and then we can bring those things to class. So it is more of a self-inquiry, inquiry mind. So our group discussed about inquiry mind. That I would say as a summary. Yeah, thank you.
That Tandakusu didn't money to the chia, so the Ansoge, and to say some look which is such as your draw or and Zandaganani, any Susuga Pamala, Chichingan Sayor, that Lapatachin, Sakwamachin, Sayor, Maris, Kitchet, Giopana, Susu Paman, Damla Dota, Susu Muni, Desijachora. Yo Mare Candas, your Candas, or what they thought to see that any ancient Zantana tree on the day, and Zantana Hapanati Colaya, the Casa, to the Chiachora, to the Chia, anything exchange Canada, which in Baticolaya, the Donald Chet in the East, to the Kusugi that you distinguish on the Dwachora, Drachachora, or Tegi, somebody, and it's Kutope Deans.
And that's really great because that idea is even incorporating inquiry mind with sort of personal connections and real world connections So I think that's a great combination.
Ate pe ya godu standard de kasanga su ge drische ge samlu ge cherso ti su su ge chua ngwe ge na ne mit mi ge ndo ge parola peche tang ge rest in stambal de ha chin ya dos.
Second one?
Yeah, niba de peronas.
다 니바딩에 직세가 제 마우코즈 셰실라스 야오지데 셰시마스 데 만주 그룹 언디다 차스파 데 지니 콜레지 신진 든단데 치바이나 네 담보 지니 생에 데 카르레스 네 고 지니 생에 데 고충에 가세 만게 가세 라바스 차시 네 지니 콜레 싱에 가세 마싱에 가세 세저라 네 데 지니 생에 데 아니 만주 기솔로 아니 가세 미모니를 가세 가세 지야라 가세 가세 지야 마라 하고야 메시케지 네, 디네 네 좀빌리 바겐가 조코 드시아나 파세 쿠차 프랑시레 마레 세조라 오데 디디스네 티와 카셰 지타니 푸드설라 아니 티티와 드zel레 체드사니 아니 타자나 로네 키쇼세 수수라 란조 체체체
오레 지니 사드 단다 지니 나사드스 거와
오데데
라소 their group discussed about a kind of a homework or self-exploring assignment, because like in the class they will ask how many, like if ask the student if they know about diabetes or not, and like do you know anything about diabetes, what happened and the disease, and then like do you know it is a pandemic or not, all this kind of question in the class, and then dismiss the class and ask them to bring in the answers by exploring, like go to internet and exploring the answers and come back to the class to share the next day. So
yeah, again, I think that's a really great strategy. And for these, there is actually evidence showing that these are good strategies. And in this case, it's building two kinds of skills, both learning the content, but also learning the skill of seeking out the information for the students.
koge namba nis ta koge nyamsi tide tang chi pechi tang gore stampote kare sena kaso gore ta ji joshi nang la ya nang tong kare chi do te ha kwa che ani te gi je la ya ani te gang la ya nits khanun che ta chi ro chilo la song de ta nits chodrup che gi chi chao che chi ro te ni cha do sa da degree yo res tin stamba de pe ya go yo res.
And let's hear just from one more, and then we'll finish up.
Ta yanche chi son ro ches ti jilan ta nga chu cha ge chi gos.
Then I will say nobody is going to say. So our group, if we teach like a diabetes, so we will try to, make two group in the classrooms, and the causes of let them, whether the diabetes caused by the genetic or the environmental conditions, and the two group, each one is one side. Also, they have a two side of one a scientific perspective and one Buddhist perspective, and two group, they have to challenge each other, like a debate form of that. Then later, and then they will first like whether it's the genetic or the environmental. So also then finally they will discuss, and then finally which one, whether they have nature versus nurture, or they need both conditions. Also the scientific way and the Buddhist way, which one they have make in a combination of these two to let them discuss more like a debate form.
Tanda ta gela khusu soya de so der do nga so ge zinda te ta nga so ge chinjina chai bai na tanda chinji ge sa khuti bai na ko zinda te tigin thonchen che bai na zinda te go sha ni la jab zinda chi te chinji sa khu sa te rig dila tani chongare sa chi che nyo te bai na ne ko khori la tani khori la tani ta chongare se gor wa ta ta ti ni sha go sha ja ti me se ne zinda ge ko den sen ni te ya chi ke chi nang pe shong ni samla tang tang ga ne kan da chi re chi bai na chai ri ke samla tang tang ga ne kan da chi re le tu sta kron ni ge paro la ya dolan chi ga tin da yens.
Wonderful. And we don't have time to talk about it now, but if you want to check, you can look at this link in the chat. This actually what Calvin was saying is really related to this method of teaching called the jigsaw. And it's a good way when you have multiple groups like that you want to kind of have them all debate and discuss. It can be a good way to organize that. So if you want to look, you can look in the chat.
지금 가서 단다 다대지 다터지도 알아샤샤요 지수탄 바이나 델라예 직소 세그레스타 카르스나 코덴선 망포지라 고샤자야 코수가 삼루티 참마 냠트 다 돌랑기 ngu건에 삼루 냠트 포야라에 지바이나 포아인 바이나 지펜트요 주탄테나 도글런선 트테테네레스 케티치 수야 델라즈니 도바이나 다토케 간데도 시네드 고레스.
And then I will just say thank you so much for all of your time and your ideas and your discussion. I and all of the biology faculty really, really appreciate it. And we just look forward to getting to keep working with you in the future. So thank you, everybody. 두텐나.
참아 TGS geladaane jingi thamsentrine gelad chamala dus ani chechunyamten dus zendat anzenda tiaraju ku kachwa tepe gauchons jima imbana nyam met dus nyamni cheriwa chigiyes nan namal hanji chamala TGS